Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Hometown Heroes. I'm Mike Kenichi. We have a special episode tonight. We're going to pay tribute to not only a great athlete who had a stellar career at Derby High School, but also a great person. And that, of course, is the late great Ed Wasikowski. And joining us tonight is his daughter, who was a phenomenal softball player at Seymour High School as well, Carissa. And Carissa, I want to thank you for coming on tonight and being a part of this.
Thanks for having me.
So, Carissa, let me ask you: how old were you when would you say when you had an idea that your father was a pretty good athlete when he was younger?
Um, I would say it was a pretty young age. He would always compare, um, his own experiences with my own sports experiences. So, you know, kind of got an idea at an early age that he was the real deal.
Right. And let me ask you, Carissa. I know you were very close with him, but would you say that playing softball at a young age really started the bond between you two?
Yeah, definitely. Been playing softball since before I can even remember. And he was always there for me.
Right. Now, interestingly enough, Carissa, he gets noticed a lot, obviously, for his baseball accomplishments, but he was a pretty good football player for Derby when he was a kid. I believe he was all Housatonic League as well in football his senior year.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So, you grow up in a family like that. Just talk to me a little bit, though. We know what he was as an athlete, but he was very supportive to both you and your brother throughout your lives, correct?
Oh, definitely, definitely. No matter what game it was, no matter what sport it was, he was always there. He was even there at practices. Um, he was even coaching both of us, throughout the years. Um, so he was always there, always supportive. Um, can't say enough good things about that. So I definitely really appreciated all of that.
Right. So, how old were you when you started playing softball? I mean, organized softball.
Oh gosh, whenever T-ball, how old do you gotta be for T-ball?
Yeah. And I mean, did he coach you at all when you were a kid?
So not as much younger. It wasn't until I would say at least like middle school when he definitely started uh becoming the coach for my teams. Um, but I always got coached at home, so wasn't too far off.
Right. And the good thing about him, though, Carissa, is I mean, he supported you, but he wasn't the type of person to push you. I mean, he enjoyed watching you play. And I mean, when you were playing for Seymour High School as a young kid or in high school, he was always at every game. And I mean, he was probably your biggest fan.
Oh, definitely, definitely. He would push me, but he would only want me to, live up to my best potential and do the best that I could. At the time, didn't really see it that way, but looking back at it, I loved everything about it. So,
Yeah, and I posted a pic before. It looked like you guys were at the Yankees game. I mean, did he take you to a lot of baseball games as a kid? I mean,
oh, definitely.
yeah. So just talk about that because
Definitely.
that's always fun when you could bond with your father and do things like that.
Yeah, so we were actually at the game when Derek Jeter hit his first career grand slam. So that's definitely one of the memories I definitely hold close, for both reasons. Um, but yeah, he was the one that introduced me to sports at such a young age, and um, that was kind of something that just carried forward. And it's nice to be able to kind of step away from at least the softball aspect and just be there for the love of the game and just share that experience together.
Yeah, and I mean, there's nothing like that. I mean, going to Yankee games, and I mean, you have that memory with him. Jeter hits his first career grand slam. It's hard to
Hmm.
believe with everything Jeter accomplished. It took him almost 15 years to hit one. But I mean,
Right.
things like that are always important. But the other thing too, Carissa, that I always remember about him is that he just loved being around baseball. He loved being around football. He just always loved sports. And I mean, I really believe when he was an official, in his early 30s, he did that more so for the fact that he loved being around that stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, let me ask you, Carissa. I mean, you knew he was a great athlete and stuff like that. And sometimes kids tend to put pressure on themselves to kind of live up to what their parents were as athletes. I mean, did you ever do that as a kid? I can't picture him ever putting that on you to do. But I mean, did you feel that sometimes that, hey, my father was a state champion, he was all league in two sports? I mean, did you ever put that pressure on yourself just to try to live up to it a little bit?
No, I didn't. He did such a good job with not kind of holding that over my head and being like, "Oh, well, I did this, so you need to do this." Um, he was very good at just using his experience to help me become a better player. Never used it to put me down or anything like that. So it only inspired me more to be better.
Right. And, he was also like a very good husband as well. Him and your mom, I mean, she was always at all his softball games throughout the time he played and everything like that. And I mean, they always had like, they were so funny together, stuff like that. I mean, but a great relationship there between the two of them and they always supported each other through it all.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Carissa. Um let's see. I would say the 77 team, obviously, we know about that. He had that big tournament. He had a tremendous season. He was a, intimidating pitcher. I mean, he used to always kind of like psych his competitors out. He was always known for that. Some have compared him to like, an early Roger Clemens and things like that. But let me ask you, I mean, did you get like a good background about that 77 team and how special it was?
For the most part, yes. I feel like there's still some stuff that, that he kinda left out, but I did get a majority of that team.
Yeah, and the thing is about him is he wasn't the type of person. He didn't care about accolades or, you know, his own accomplishments. He was always about the team. That's how he was when he played football. That's how he was when he played baseball. When he played softball years later for PYMC, it was the same thing. I mean, he just loved being around his friends, his teammates, and I
Mhm.
mean, he really embraced all of that.
Yeah, yeah, and he instilled that into me because part of the reason why I loved the game was the people I was around.
Right. And I mean, let me ask you, did you I know you played softball, but did you like basketball? I mean, did you do any cross country at Seymour or was it strictly just softball?
I only played volleyball and softball, so
Right. And I mean, you had a very good career as well. I mean, when you look back on it, I believe you were on two state championship teams, at least one, but I mean, and
mm-mm,
oh, none, huh? Well, I
none.
do apologize.
Unfortunately, that's one thing that my dad had over me was the state champions. Never got one, unfortunately.
Right. But you did start as a freshman, if I remember correctly. So, I mean, right off
Mhm.
the bat, Coach Barreras, he saw your ability, saw the talent in you. And I mean, that's probably years of going to the batting cage with your father, practicing with him outside of your regular team and things like that. So, I mean, he played a big part in the success of your career just by always working with you.
Oh, 1000%. When I was pitching, he was always on the bucket catching for me. We had the pop-up t the for hitting off the tee, so we'd had that in the front yard. You know, he was always there no matter what, in and out of softball, always there.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, when your brother played sports as a kid, he coached him as well a little bit, correct?
Yeah, he was, his baseball coach for Little League, and then he coached him in, Pop Warner.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was always around it. I mean, he was always there for the love of his kids and things like that. And I mean, you could talk about people that you grew up with and, you looked up to and heroes like that. But I would say, like, him and your mother were probably your biggest heroes in life, correct?
Oh, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. And I mean, Carissa, let me ask you, when you look back on it all, like playing in high school sports and things like that, I mean, what lessons did you take from him that you took with you when you were on the field all the time?
Oh, wow. I mean, definitely always just keeping your head in the game, don't try to overthink anything, just go out there and play how you know how to play. Like you put all these hours into practicing, in and out of actual team stuff and by yourself. You just gotta go out there and do what you need to do.
Right.
So,
Well, Carissa, we do have one guest on right now, and he's a good friend of your father's. And of course, that's the one and only Tim Conlin, and he's joining us right now. And Tim, I want to thank you for coming on for a few minutes today because you were very close to Ed. So, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on today.
Well, you're welcome. My privilege, Michael. Hello, Chris. How are you?
good. How are you?
Good. I'm having a tough time hearing you guys, though. I'm not very good at the computer. My volume was down low, so I didn't want to try to fix it as you were just bringing me on. So I haven't.
Okay. Can you hear us okay now?
Yeah. Don't worry about me. I'll
Okay,
figure it out here. Hold on a second.
Yep.
I figured it out.
Okay, perfect. So, Tim, let me ask you. I mean, how did you begin a friendship with Ed? I mean, when did you first meet him? Would you say?
Well, actually, I first, I didn't play on Ed's baseball team in high school, though I followed a lot of the games and everything. But I first met Ed, of course, way back in grammar school. I grew up in the west side of town. He grew up in the east side. He went to St. Michael's. And Chris's grandmother was just a staple there for my wife because she went to St. Michael's and all my kids. So your grandmother has always been, a beautiful lady and institution over there. But I would meet Ed and your grandfather would go to all his games and bitty basketball and of course, Little League baseball. And, Little League baseball is where, he cut his teeth and that was probably his favorite sport, as you know. He played for the Athletics. He was he was their catcher and their pitcher. So he showed the promise even back then as being a steady force on the mound. And then, of course,
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
no, of course, then from there, we, met in high school and we played on the same football team. And he was our linebacker. He was the mainstay, calling all the different defenses for us. And as you know, we had quite a good team. And then, just all through high school, he didn't play basketball. His sport was baseball and football. And later on, I, of course, see him throughout the valley and bump into him. And then he had told me that he had videotapes of the football team. I said, get out of here. And the old 8mm he had gotten from Mr. Marcuscio of the games. And so he met me to hand off the videotapes. I'd made them into DVDs. And of all places we met, it was over in Ansonia. He had brought you, Carissa, there for softball lessons. If you remember, over by, I forget the name of the street over there, by where the funeral parlor is and back over there.
Yeah.
But he was just, Ed was just always a great person, great student, of course, great athlete, and a great friend to everybody. He was never one of those guys who, was ever a wise guy to anybody, and was always there to, help out, participate. And as you know, we had gotten Carissa and her mom Debbie and Eddie were we had through a picnic several years ago in honor of Ed, and we started a scholarship fund. And from there, we've done like a little mini. That's a great picture of Carissa. And from there, we have a mini golf tournament every year that we add to the pot for the scholarship fund. And it's actually become like the Ed Wasikowski weekend because at the picnic we had so many classmates show up for it, to participate in it. And ever since then, not the golf tournament is small. We play at Tommy Ketchmark's golf course where he's a member, and but the night before, a bunch of us classmates meet. We'll meet at one of the local establishments and everything, and just talk about high school and everything. And of course, your dad is always top bill for us talking about. Now, I know you guys are probably, Mike, I think you're doing something down the road with the championship baseball team, hopefully with people like Dave DeRosa and and
More,
Dice
yeah.
and all those guys. That'd be a great show to see, to hear all the ins and outs of that championship season.
And Tim, talk a little bit about that. I know you weren't on that team, but you were around then. I mean, you were a
Yeah.
senior in
Oh,
high school. Just talk about, because I was saying to Carissa earlier, he was known as the intimidator when he was on the mound. I mean, that was part of, a big part of his game is his uh, opposition went up against him, and they feared him when he was pitching.
Well, you know what? The guys who play baseball know more about it. We'll be able to tell the particulars. But from what I hear and understand from listen to, because just knowing Ed back in Little League, he was always a thinker. At that time back in Little League, it wasn't like he was necessarily the fastest thrower, on the mound, but it was accuracy. And from I hear from talking to the other folks who played on the championship baseball team, his control and the different pitches that he was able to use was really the big factor of him. And then putting together that great streak, it was just great. So I went to probably just about every game during that run to go to go witness it. Not that we knew they were going to win a championship, but it was so great over in was it West Haven whenever they won that. That was a blast.
And Tim, one thing I think about, I don't want to compare it too much because that 76 football team had a great year. But I think about the 91 Derby football team. They had the first losing season in 28 years. And then the 92 team goes on to win the baseball state championship. So the seniors were able to find redemption on the baseball field. And then I look at 76. They had two tough, heartbreaking losses to Ansonia. So that's a tough way to kind of end your senior season in football. But then that baseball team, those seniors found another way for redemption, and they won a state title. So, I mean, that had to, soften the blow, because it's never fun to lose to Ansonia. But
no. We talk about the Ansonia loss to this day. When you're a young kid playing, you don't think about it. And your coaches are saying, you'll talk about this forever. And we sure are. But that's a great picture right there of everybody. That was after the championship. So you can see Tom Fay.
Yeah. And it's funny. It's funny, too, because, that those kids they were very unique personalities, very funny kids. And they went out there and they just knew how to win. But a lot of those kids, Ed included, they had no fear when they competed. When they went out there, they were ready for it. And usually that's how you win, when you can go out there, play the game of baseball and not always think about, am I going to strike out? Am I going to get a hit? They just went out there and they played.
Yeah, they did. And, those guys they were serious. They lived and breathed baseball. And a lot of them, of course, we're on the football team too, and that discipline, I think, helps in every sport that you play. I mean, they're blue collar kids, from the Valley, and they played in the Housatonic League. Was a tough league for baseball, and they're playing against the best competition around. So when the run came, they had everything.
Yeah, and they went 12-8 in the regular season. I think they went 10-8 in the Housatonic, which is very hard to do.
Right.
And then to win 5 games and win that state title and go 17-8. I mean, that was the first real. I mean, Derby had some good baseball teams in the 50s, but I mean, that was the real first big time Derby baseball team. I mean, first championship, and just what they did. And I mean, that's a credit to so many of them. But I mean, it starts with pitching, and I mean, Waz was just, he was one of a kind.
He was, and everybody. I mean, I can't wait for you when you have the other show, because, there's not enough that could be said. All the different intricacies, all the different players, and who went into, they put him in this field, and this one got hurt, so we put him over here, and all that stuff. I mean, people just think baseball is just a straight up and down game, but there's a lot going on in order to win a game, or where you put people.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But you run on the hot hand, and Ed had it, and those games, and he was prepared for it because, like you said, like the tough league that they're in, and the tough, toughness of him, to dig down, and each player on the team to dig down and to push that out.
Yeah, and one of the things I enjoyed watching Ed the most is when he played for PYMC, he was really funny, to watch. I mean, he could hit the heck out of the ball. But another guy that coached Ed as well and was very good friends with him is our next guest, and I don't see a picture on him, so we're gonna have to just have audio. But of course, that's Steve Riley. And Steve, can you hear me? Okay.
I like the picture of him though.
Yeah. I don't know if you could.
Nice.
Steve, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. See, I knew.
Smells like he's probably one notch below me with the computer.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, the technology today could be so difficult at times. Hopefully, we'll get him up there. We'll see what's going on. But
I'm sure, yeah, he's got a lot to say.
But Tim, one of the things about Waz that I loved is he was just so funny. I mean, when you would talk to him, I mean, I remember when he was refereeing my basketball games, and I always tell this story because he kind of saved me from humiliation one time. I was playing biddy basketball, and we were either in the championship game, maybe the semi game, and the other team was making a comeback, and I started to panic, and I inbounded the ball, and I definitely put my foot over that line. I mean, it was obvious, and I'm thinking he missed the call. I even heard the other coach say, "Are you kidding me?" But the one thing that I didn't realize was he knew me well, and he was kind of throwing me a bone there because after the game, he said to me, he goes, "You're welcome." He said something to that effect. But I always was grateful for that because he could have easily, called me over the line. And then we were only up by one at that point. That team could have taken the lead, and he saved me. I always say that he saved me from humiliation.
Yeah. And he had the beautiful smile, and he'd say with a little chuckle too, and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just the type of guy he was. And I mean, Carissa, I mean, you got to see that more so than any of us. But I mean, he was definitely one of the funniest guys out there. I mean, he can make you laugh all the time. Just talk about, that outgoing personality that he had.
Oh gosh, there was never a time that he wasn't cracking a joke or
Mhm.
smiling, and he always tried to make light of any type of situation. When he had to be serious, he had to be serious, but there's plenty of times throughout travel ball when other coaches, and he'd be coaching as well, they'd get very upset, they're not playing well. He would always have to come in with a joke. You know, he wanted everyone to, enjoy the game and, have the same experience as he did, just loving the game, playing the best that he can, and, kind of just leaving it up to that.
Right, exactly. And Tim, just talk about what he meant to you as a friend, because I mean, more than anything else, he's the type of guy that, you could be battling with him on the basketball court when you play pickup games or playing softball, and he's competitive. But when sports are not involved, if you needed him to do anything for you, he's there for you, because that's what so many guys have told me. And we're going to have another guy coming on soon who could tell that. But I mean, that was the type of person he was. He was just always very generous too.
He was, my relationship with Ed was always great. Never a coarse word or anything like that. And like I said, on the football field, it was the same thing. He never got rattled. I mean, he was a linebacker and called defense and did the best he can. I mean, it's one of the toughest positions on the field is being a linebacker. And no, he was never condescending or anything like that. Never, pointing blame at anybody on the field if something was missed. And so he was easy to very easy to get along with and to play beside. That's for sure. The thing is that, yeah, I mean, everybody. I sorry, as you get out of high school, college, and you're talking, when people do different things, refereeing, everybody's playing in senior leagues and softball and basketball and everything, raising a family. We really miss Ed now. Of course, Carissa, you miss him so dearly and everything. But it's like as you get older, all our friends, we have a very tight class, and and I wonder, there's a bunch of us always been tight, but it would be great to have him around now. He would just so much enjoy, looking back at all the different memories. So that's the only thing. It would be great to have him now.
Right. And we have two more guys entering the show. Of course, we have Steve Riley, who coached Ed. He was very good friends with him, and then of course we also have Oni DeMauro, who played softball with Waz and is very good friends with Waz as well. So Steve and Oni, thank you for coming on and joining this tribute to Waz. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yeah, I can hear you. You're good.
I'm trying to get my volume
Thank
up
you,
on
Mike.
this. I'm using my
Thank you, Mike,
wife's
for
iPad now.
Yeah.
I tried it on a laptop and it just didn't work.
Yeah,
You got to get rid
I know
of the StreamYard thing,
technology,
man. You got to change your server here. I don't know. The StreamYard stuff is too sophisticated.
It works the best. I'll
You just
tell
got
you.
to go to like, what is it? Skype?
You're going way back. But
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Oni, I'll start with you because I was telling them before you came on. I mean, I remember Waz playing for PYMC, and those PYMC teams were so enjoyable to watch, and they were such good teams. But just talk about playing with Waz and the friendships that you guys had with him, because I mean, he wasn't just a great softball player, baseball player. He's a great guy as well.
Well, let me put it this way. Waz was always a great teammate, but he was a greater friend off the field. And, the PY days, there's 1,001 stories I can tell you on here. But I'm sure this is a family show. So, yeah.
But let me ask you, Oni. I mean,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, but he was also a very good softball player. I mean, him and I remember a guy. If I get his name wrong, I apologize, but I think his name was Hutz. Those two guys were power hitters in that lineup, and I mean, he was as good a baseball player as he was, and a pitcher and stuff like that. He was a tremendous softball player, probably one of the best softball players in the Valley at the time. Yep. Can you hear me
Was
okay?
he was the typical PY guy. He was like his knowledge of the game was fantastic. He hit for power, and he was slow just like the rest of us. But that's what made us the team we were. And just one story that I remember, we were about his knowledge. We were playing Arnie's Plumbing down at AFCO Field in the second, and it was a tight game. And back then, like the score was, we ended up winning 4-3, and he scored the winning run. And how he scored the winning run was he comes sliding into third base, and the ball went off the third baseman and rolled past. He got up, and the pitcher was standing in the baseline going to home, and he grabbed the pitcher, and kept running home. And knowing the rules that you can't get thrown out at the plate, if you go back to third, you get third. There was interference. He went home. That was the winning run. We win the game. That was his knowledge of the game. He was that smart.
Smart, yeah.
Right. And I mean, you must have had a blast playing with him and all those guys on PYMC, because I mean, I think you guys played double headers on Sundays a lot. I mean, you guys played a ton of games year round from spring till, early fall. So, I mean, you guys were around each other quite a bit.
Yeah, we played 100+ games a year. I mean, we played from April to just about like the middle of September. At times we got tired of looking at each other, but we were mostly a close-knit family. We did stuff on and off the field all the time, and that was the kind of family that we were with PY.
Right. Now, Carissa, were you able to ever see some of those games, or had he stopped playing by the time you were old enough to remember?
That was before I could remember. I'm sure I was probably there at some point.
Yeah, but a tremendous softball player. And Steve, how did your relationship with Waz begin? I mean, how did you first meet him?
I met him when I was coaching the senior Babe Ruth team, and then I watched him. I knew Dave DeRosa, and I watched him play when he was a freshman. And I went to a freshman game back in down in Branford, and a couple of the varsity guys got tossed off the team right before the game. And Ed and Dave DeRosa were put into the starting lineup as freshmen. And that's when I started watching them, because I said, wait a minute, if a guy, it's very, very rare that you'd have a freshman starting on a varsity team. And
Right.
so when I saw that happening, I was like, well, I better watch these guys, because they, they're going to play for me on the Senior Babe Ruth level someday. So I watched them down in Brantford play in that varsity game, and they held their own. And that's how I basically got to know him. But I knew, I think Dave DeRosa, I might have known him first, but right around the same time.
Right. And let me ask you, I mean, I know you coached some of those kids. Were you able to coach Waz in that, what was it, the Senior Babe Ruth team? I mean, were you able to coach him at all?
You mean coach him? Yeah.
Yeah.
He was coachable. I mean, Waz was an extreme competitor. He did not like to lose. Him and Pat McCormick, they came off that 1977 team. I had Waz 1976, I believe it was 76 is when he was on my Senior Babe Ruth team. And that's when I had Eddie, and I had Pat McCormick and a host of others from that 77 state championship team. And I got to know him very well, because I learned right away that he was extremely, extremely confident. And he had a very, very supportive family. I mean, every game that I coached him in, he had his father there, his mother there, his uncle there. He'd have this entourage of people would show up into the stands. And but I guess I also learned later they were also related to, there was a Dobeck father that was there all the time too. Yeah. They called him Uncle Dewey or something. So he was always at all the games too. So, he was very, very competitive, did not want to lose. Him and Dave DeRosa were like very, very alike in that. Very competitive people. But it was a blast to coach those guys, because, you get guys who are very competitive, and all you really have to do, it's sort of like a jockey in a horse race. You just have to hold them back a little bit and then let them loose. And then they just they're terrors, on the field. I mean, Ed got to, I think part of what developed Ed was he watched, as all of us did across the country, the rise of Mark the Bird Friedrich. And if anybody wants to look him up, you'll see the character that this guy, Mark the Bird Friedrich, was for the Detroit Tigers. And he became sort of like a phenomenon. And Ed patterned a lot of what he did. And like I said, I always wondered, did Ed pattern him, or did somehow the Bird get to watch Waz pitch? And so I always wondered, who came first with this whole ritual on the mound. Like, Ed would go out, manicure the mound with his hand, get himself all wildly pumped up before the first pitch of the game. He would aim the baseball with his hand. He'd pull it back and forth like he's trying to aim it towards the strike zone or something. He had all kinds of rituals that he would use before he actually took the mound itself and threw the ball. But I can tell you, one of the things he was already developed to a great degree as a pitcher before I got him. I mean, I was basically dealing with his mental game, some refinements with his hitting, because, guys didn't get a lot of hitting coaching back then. So I was more working on his hitting aspects. He had Tom Fay for the pitching. So, he was really developed as a pitcher by the time I saw him.
Yeah. And as I mentioned before, I mean, he's known for his pitching, but he was also a very good hitter as well. I mean, he could do everything. He was very, good at everything he did.
Oh, let me tell you something. It's like this, Mike. You did not want to play against him. You know what I mean? You wanted him on your team. You know what I mean? It was like, he's one of those kids that, you just look at him and say, gee, I'm glad I got this guy, and he's not throwing for the other team, because he's just going to dominate, and he's going to dominate in a way that shows he's just exuberating confidence at the same time. I mean, some people might have looked at him and thought he was really cocky, but he was in his own world. I mean, when he was on the mound, he was in his own zone. I mean, it was like nothing else mattered except getting that batter out. And, he worked at his craft. He worked hard at it. Hitting, he took very, very seriously. I mean, look, in 1977, Waz was the catcher when Pat McCormick pitched. Pat McCormick was the catcher when Waz pitched. So it was like they just flip-flopped they took the catcher's gear on and off. And sometimes it was in the middle of a game when they relieved each other. And sometimes it was, it would last the whole game. But, the one thing I knew about those guys, Waz especially, was they were going to be great leaders for that team. It wasn't going to matter who coached them, really. I mean, they were going to take that team all the way to that state title. No matter who was sitting there. Although Tom Fay, you have to admit, he did a good job keeping them under wraps, keeping them, calmer than their emotions might get them to. Because Tom was a very unemotional type of coach. But Waz was, like I said, he was just like one of those kids where you wanted him on your team. But he also enjoyed a lot of other stuff, though, Mike. He loved to eat. I'm telling you, he loved to eat. Like if you had any dugout, he was going to get it, And I'll never forget the time. Like took the team to Maine. We were up in Maine, and kids had a choice of whether or not to go to the arcade, and screw around in the arcade, or come with me and the other coach to go to this famous lobster place in Maine. And Ed just looked at his friends and said, "Nah, I'm going to eat the lobster." He didn't want any part of them. He was like, "No, I'm going with Rouse. I'm going to go eat the lobster. Forget about playing skee-ball at some arcade." So it was just a pleasure, and to coach him. And I tell you, it's just a very, very unique player to say the least.
Yeah, and Oni, Steve talked about how those kids were confident and Waz was confident. That's kind of how those PYMC teams were when Waz was on them. I mean, you guys always felt like you were going to win every time you went out there, right?
Yeah, we did. We didn't look like much of a ball to a lot of other teams, but yeah, Waz was always confident. He's always confident in his hitting, his fielding. There wasn't a position he wouldn't play, and it just like we were once, the both of us were in a little minor slump, and somebody had brought their dog to the field one day. So I was sitting there, and I'm petting the dog, and I'm rubbing my bat on the dog, and I get up and I get a hit my first 2 times up. The next thing I do, I see Waz. He's looking over. I'm looking over at Waz, and he's rubbing the dog too, and he's rubbing his bat on the dog.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely, tremendous athlete. And I mean, Tim, you got to, like I said, play football with him. And I mean, sometimes I think his baseball, which should, because he was tremendous, it gets a lot of the recognition, but he was a very underrated football player, as we talked about. And I mean, he was all Housy. So, I mean, he could hold his own in any sport he played.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, like I said, he was the defensive play caller. He was our linebacker, So, tough kid. The football dynamics are always a little bit different. It's fun to hear about the baseball because the baseball, football, I think he was more level where it wasn't, no one's extra exuberant because everybody's adrenaline is going as it is. But when you talk about the baseball, is fun to hear because I could just imagine the competitiveness of Waz, along, of course, with the competitiveness of Dave DeRosa, and then you throw people like Pat McCormick in there, and what that does to the dynamics of mixing up the team and getting everybody going and going for that championship. It's a different dynamic, I think, on the baseball field. But football, he was always level-headed, tough, did his job, and like I said, we were an undersized team, and we did extremely well for being a size. Everybody was undersized for each position, but he did a great job. He was a great teammate.
Right. And Carissa, I mean, let me ask you, I mean, before each game, I mean, was there ever a pep talk he gave you, or did he just realize it's better to just not say anything, let her play? And I mean, I'm sure he always offered advice during the game and after the game as well, correct?
Oh yeah, definitely. the bigger games, I definitely would get the bigger pep talks, but there's some times where he was just like, you just got to trust that, all the stuff that I've taught her along the way is gonna, work out for her. But yeah, I would definitely get the pep talks. That's one of the things I do miss is his pep talk. So I always appreciated those.
Yeah, and I'm sure it wasn't just sports either. I mean, he gave you pep talks about life, stuff like that. Because I mean, like I said, he was a fierce competitor, but off the field, he was one of the nicest guys you'd ever meet. So I mean, you got to see that every day of your life, and that's something that was probably so rewarding for you just growing up.
Yeah, no matter whatever issues I might have had, school, sports, just life in general, he was always my go-to person for that, him and my mom, depending. But yeah, he was always, my number one supporter, always there for me, um, gave me his best life advice, and yeah.
Yeah, and Tim, let me ask you, what's one thing that stands out about Waz more than anything else to you?
Oh, I would say his sense of humor, his laughter, and like just how he was able to be competitive, but also keep it light, never get personal in anybody's face. Just his enthusiasm was what, you gravitated to.
Yeah, definitely. And Steve, what would you
Yeah.
say? What was one like? If there was one you could pick, what is the thing you remember most about Waz more than anything else?
Well, just thinking about it, I'm starting to get tears. It's just like because we had so many times where we were in the dugout talking about baseball. And the one thing I guess besides his competitiveness, I would say his love for the game. I mean, Eddie had an unbelievable love for the game of baseball. I mean, he just wanted to live it, play it. We could have played it in the dark. He would have kept playing. I mean, you didn't need a light out for him to want to play baseball. I mean, he could literally say, "Okay, let's go." Look at you like, "Why do you want to play? It's dark. So what?" He just had a really, really big love for the game, and his intensity was only between the lines. You know what I mean? Like I saw him outside the lines, he was always easy going, but inside the lines, once he got across that chalk mark, it was a whole different ball game. And he just, like I said, he just loved to play baseball. That's what I remember about him the most. Just the likability of. I mean, we had, I never forget. He wasn't that. We went up to Maine, and that time we were somebody lofted up a mug up in the air and in the middle of the night and landed on his head, and he was the first one to get up and start swinging at people. Say, who the hell who threw the mug?
Yeah.
But so I had broken up scuffles at times, but all in all, they all loved him. The guys on his team at 7-17, they were extremely close. I mean,
Yeah.
And the other thing I loved about Eddie was, you got to remember, it was the time of the CB radio, right? So Waz had, and I'm still trying to think of his handle. He had a CB radio that had this huge antenna at his house. And so I'd go around and occasionally I'd go on the CB radio and there he would. He'd cut in and say, "Hey, I'm here," So we'd have fun riding around to figure out where the hell he was. And it ended up being in his house. Because we found out he had this like 40-foot antenna on his house when he was playing with the CB radio. It was like a crazy phenomenon back then. I forgot his handle. It'll come to me sooner or later, but he had a unique handle, as I remember. But just thinking about him, just makes me, want to cry sometimes because he was cut down far too soon. You know what I mean? It's like, but I'll say this, Carissa, I can't believe you're not going to say he drove you nuts trying to help you with softball. I can't believe that he wouldn't go out in the backyard and say, "Okay, here, catch this fastball." You know what I mean? Like, or throw this. I mean, to just simply think of him, I imagine him like saying, "All right, you're going to hit this ball when you're 2 years old."
I mean, there definitely were those times, but as I got older, I was able to start giving it back to him. So
Yeah.
he kind of,
Yeah.
he set himself up for that. That's what he taught me. So now he's getting it right
He got
back.
back.
And
Yeah.
he kind of learned that if she's gonna talk back, then we gotta watch what we say a little bit. But
Yeah. No, I'm sure.
So Oni, when you think of Waz, what is the one thing that, when you think of him, you think of most?
Just a great friend to start with. But if we're talking about the game, just his knowledge. I mean, we used to sit, on hours, talking about the game, situations. He would make situations up. What would you do in this? And we both ended up umpiring. Not together, but knowing the rules and stuff like that. That was always to me like something very strong that he carried with him. It's just his mind was always thinking like 2 steps ahead. So he was that kind of ball player.
Yeah, he definitely was. Well, guys, I want to thank you for coming on for a few minutes. I'm going to finish up real quick with Carissa, but I really appreciate you guys coming on because I know how much you guys meant to him, and it was important that you were on today.
Yeah,
Thank
he
you,
was
Mike.
the best, Mike. Carissa, he was the best.
Mike, Carissa, God bless.
Bye-bye.
Well,
Bye,
thank you, guys.
guys.
Mike, just a little side note that I don't know if Chris told you, but I met Waz, but our daughters, my daughter and Carissa, they became good friends too. So
Yeah, well,
That's
that's
true.
awesome.
It came,
You should have led with that
came full
side note.
circle.
Yeah, that's a great story because, a lot of times that used to happen, especially in Derby many years, the fathers,
That's a nice side note.
then their sons became good friends. And so, seeing the daughters become great friends, that's just a great story. So thank you for sharing that.
That's nice.
No problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take care,
Thank
guys.
you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you, Mike, for
Thank you.
Good night,
Thanks,
Chris.
Chris.
Yep.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Steve. Thank you, guys.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Yep. So, Carissa, real quick, I mean, let me ask you this before we go. I mean, for somebody who didn't know your father well or just only knew about him or read about him, just tell me what he was as a person. I don't, we know what he was as an athlete, but just tell me what he was as a person and a father for you.
Well, as a person, as everybody just, kind of explained, he was always fun to be around. And, I always heard great things from people who knew him, before me.
Yeah.
And as a family guy, he was the absolute best, the best dad, the best husband, the best coach. I can't say enough good things about him. And he was just so selfless, so selfless. Anything anybody else needed, he'd be there for them. Anything I needed or my brother needed, he'd drop everything that he's doing to give that to us, whatever we needed. I know one story, I believe it was around NVLs, I want to say for softball. I'm going to say maybe my junior year. I went into a little bit of a hitting slump. Started blaming everything else but me. Started blaming my bat. My bat was dead. I needed a new one. He didn't really argue with it. He, went out. This was that without me knowing either. He went out, bought me a new bat. So $200-300 later, showed up to the field right before the game, gave me the bat, and that was just the type of person that he was. Anything that his family needed, even if we both knew that it wasn't the bat that was the issue, he would do anything for his kids and for his family.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like him. I mean, he was a great guy, and he's he may be gone, but he's never forgotten. He's always going to be remembered, especially in the town of Derby. But for everybody that was fortunate enough to know him, and I do really appreciate you coming on today and sharing some great stories about him. And he was definitely one of the best. So, Carissa, thank you for coming on. I really do appreciate it, and it was an honor.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Well, folks, there you have it. You just got to hear from some people who knew Ed Wasikowski throughout the years. You heard from Steve Riley, and Steve told you the great stories. Some were very emotional, some were funny. Then you had Oni DeMoro and Tim Conlon share their stories, the friendships they had with him. And you realize that Ed was a tremendous athlete. Nobody will ever deny that. He was a state champion baseball player. He was all Valley, all Housy in both football and baseball. And I mean, an unbelievable softball player, which I mentioned. He also did things, outside of sports as well. He was always involved in the community of Derby. He was a respected official for Biddy basketball, for senior basketball. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface as far as the other things he's done. But the most important thing to me is this picture right here, and that's who he was as a family man. He loved his children very much. He loved his wife very much. And I mean, they were his whole world. And, he was a big fan of many things, but the biggest fan he was of his kids and his wife. And I mean, the bond that you saw that they had and what Carissa told you today just speaks volumes about the type of man he is. I said it a little earlier, he may be gone, but don't ever think he's forgotten, because the memories that Ed Wasikowski provided over the years as an athlete, as a person, will be there forever, and they will never be forgotten. He was simply one of the best you'll ever meet, and we are proud that he was a part of our great town of Derby and the person that he is. For Hometown Heroes, I'm Mike Kenichi saying good night, everyone.